Hi and welcome back to Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen. For this video I wanted to talk about the concept of justice in Judaism, or as we call it, tzedek. Before I go on though, I want to tell you a story about something that happened, I think about 13 odd years ago, but left a deep and lasting impression on me. It was during the war in Afghanistan that followed the September 11th attacks. And the American Air Force had mistakenly bombed a UN medical facility, a military hospital. It was a horrific mistake. There were over 200 casualties, many of whom were medical personnel, doctors, nurses, who had volunteered in many cases to go out there and help heal the sick and wounded. But obviously there would have been many wounded people in amongst there as well, who had sought refuge in what they thought was a safe place. By all accounts, it was a horrible mistake. For reasons I've not yet understood, I think it's part of the American cathartic mentality. The Air Force wheeled out the general that was responsible for that mission on national, and obviously that became international, television to apologise. And I remember seeing the look on his face and thinking, what do we want this guy to do? He's going to get court-martialed. His career in the Air Force, in the US military as a whole, is probably finished. He's never going to work doing this sort of work again. He can come out and say sorry. Okay. What does that mean? How does that help the grieving families of and friends of those that have suffered as a result of this fatal mistake? How are we ever going to achieve justice in such a situation? We can all think of other situations like that, where mistakes have been made, an inquiry has set out things, and afterwards there are lessons to be learned, and people are going to try to do things differently. But nonetheless, there are still these victims there and their families that have yet to live, that have to live with this for the rest of their lives. How can we possibly achieve justice? Well, I think, looking at it logically, there are three possibilities. Either we say that the perpetrator has to suffer some kind of loss. Well, we do that, don't we? We punish perpetrators of genocide and so on, and we lock them up in prison. But okay, they've suffered that loss, but does that really equate to what the crime is that they've committed? On the flip side of the balance, we can say that the victim, or their families, or whatever it is, has to be recompensed in some way. Compensated either from the perpetrator, or from their stakeholders, whatever that may be, or through the state, or whatever it is. Or we could take a third option. And without giving too much away about the third option, the third option would be that there needs to be some sort of rebalancing of the relationship between, I guess, both parties, but certainly the perpetrator and God and their maker. Let's look at those three options logically and see if there's situations that we can knock them out. And in the words of Sherlock Holmes, if you remove all of the things that you know not to be true, what remains must be the true option. So let's look at a situation where the victim suffers no loss. There is a principle in Jewish law. It comes up in Gemara Kesubos. You're welcome to look it up. Page 26, starting with the Mishnah. The example in the Mishnah is a little bit grisly. It talks about rape, but we're going to keep it nice and positive and happy, I guess. And we'll talk about some examples that I hope people can relate to. What about, are there situations where either the victim does not receive a loss, doesn't receive recompense, or the perpetrator does not have to receive some sort of punishment? Well, the principle of Kim de Rabelais goes like this. If someone commits a crime which involves two simultaneous averas, mistakes, sins, whatever you want to call it, which both have separate punishments, they only receive the more severe punishment. Now you can understand why that might be, for obvious reasons, in the death penalty. You can't kill someone twice. And we have the death penalty as administered by the Sanhedrin, which is only in existence during temple times, and there were very, very, very specific circumstances under which they would do so. Very rare, we set the bar very, very high for that. But nonetheless, theoretically, it could happen. So for example, if someone were to eat a cheeseburger on Yom Kippur or Pesach. Let's stick with Pesach. Pesach's easy. Yom Kippur is a little bit more complicated. So they've eaten milk and meat together. They've eaten a non-kosher meat on Pesach with chometz bun. Okay, so they've done three things together at the same time. What do we do with that person? We can't kill them twice. So the truth is that we go with the more serious of the punishments. Okay, and they are exempt from the lesser of the averas that they've done. What about a more personal example, though? What about someone who steals money on Shabbos? Now, again, we wouldn't apply this today. This is a theoretical example as to when the Sanhedrin or the Beis Din would sit in Jerusalem with the temple standing. Taking ownership of money on Shabbos is a capital offence. Stealing is a civil offence. You would have to repay the victim. But because the person, the perpetrator, has done two simultaneous averas at the same time by taking the money and stealing, they are only punished for what they've done, for the avera of breaking Shabbos. They do not have to repay the victim for the money they've stolen. Again, this is a theoretical case, and I wouldn't advocate anyone doing this. You'll get caught by the police, and they'll come after you, and they'll take you for everything you got. So don't do it. But what happens if it happens? So we see there a case where someone does an avera, but doesn't need to repay for what they've done. How can that be justice? Let me give you another example. What if someone steals something that's worthless? Do they have to repay then? Well, the answer's no. There is such an example in Jewish law. There are one or two examples we could use. The Hebrew phrase is shor haniskel, is an ox that has to be put down for whatever reason. Maybe it's dangerous or whatever it is. We need to kill it. But what if someone stole such an ox? Well, the Jewish law says that between the Beis Din sanctioning that animal needs to be put down, between that ruling being issued and the animal actually being killed, during that time it's as if the animal is dead and it is worthless. And under certain circumstances, animals under this situation, one is forbidden from deriving any benefit from even. So it's absolutely worthless. You can't even do anything with it. Okay. The Gemara discusses whether you can do anything with his dung. Okay. What if he stole it? Well, the answer is no. He doesn't have to repay. He's done something wrong. He shouldn't steal. We don't want to advocate stealing. We don't want to encourage it. But nonetheless, he stole nothing. Now, it's not a great example because you could say, well, if he's stolen nothing, he's not done anything wrong, and maybe it isn't even stealing. But nonetheless, the physical act is there. He's done something to take ownership. He tried to take ownership of something that isn't his, and yet he doesn't have to repay. So we see two examples there where the perpetrator suffers no loss, and the victim is not repaid. How can that be what we call in traditional, what we're used to in English as judicial system, how can that be justice? The answer is the third option that I said, is that tzedakah, tzedek, is about rebalancing. We talk about tzedakah, which is the same root word, which is giving charity to those less fortunate than ourselves. It's not about, they're poor, so we need to give it to them. Tzedakah is a rebalancing, is an equilibrium that we need to achieve between the haves and the have-nots. God sees fit to distribute money in the way that God does, and therefore we need to redistribute it in such a way to help those that are less fortunate than ourselves. It's not that we owe it to them. It's not that they need to come chasing us for it. It's just that's what needs to happen for the economy to work in the way that it does. That's the way God runs the world. So in the case of Jewish justice, we can't hope for that poor general to ever come to any sense of recompense or remorse, or to feel adequately the pain of what he's done, even mistakenly. But what we can do is try and rebalance the relationships that he and the families of the victims do have with their Maker, to try and move on and to try and build a better world as a result. And yes, there will be learning from mistakes, and obviously it would have been better if it never happened in the first place. And we can't condone carelessness. There's the moral hazard that comes about through doing that. But what there is underlying it is that relationship with God. And this is what people struggle with, is that even in the basest of actions that seem to involve helping another individual, helping that old lady cross the road, giving to others in our spare time, not only helps our relationships with each other, not only helps us, but helps us reconnect with our Maker as well, reconnect with God. It's those simple actions. There's a beautiful explanation given by Rav Moshe Feinstein, a great posek, a great rabbinical authority in the sort of 70s and 80s. He died in the early 80s, but the 70s. During the month of Elul that we're in right now, we blow the shofar after the morning service. And he says, well, why after the morning service? Why not before? The shofar is there to wake us up, to do teshuvah, to come back to God. Why don't we blow right in the first thing in the morning as we walk into shul, bang, and then we're ready to go? He says, no, we do it after we pray to God, when we're about to face the outside world. Because that's what the shofar is doing. It's reconnecting us. It's bridging that gap between our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. You're going out to face the world. That's where you need to work on. That's where we all need to improve. That's where we need the most help. That's what justice is about, is reconnecting that ability, that connection between our relationship with each other and our relationship with God. Even mitzvahs, it amazes me that in the Ten Commandments, the most important mitzvahs that we have is about respect for others, respect for parents, and respect for each other's property, even in thought, because that is what is important to Judaism. Shabbat Shalom, and Chag Sameach, and I'll take this opportunity again to wish you Lashana Tova.